take my hand.
4 years ago, the snow stung at my skin as I trudged headlong through the wind. The faint blue sun emanated no warmth as it rose slowly behind the swirling mass of gray slag. It was about 6:30 in the morning as the phone dropped from my ear and I shoved it into my pocket. School would have just started by now, I thought to myself, thinking back to the way I had told my mother I was too sick to attend. I wasn't really lying to her. My appearance alone was probably what convinced her. But as my hands shook in the insides of my jacket, the blood beginning to dribble from the red wounds, I was likely more sick than I knew. My heart pounded, attempting to mask out my overpowering fear with rage. The way Julie had acted when she showed up with only 20 minutes left of school. Horribly plain, not an ounce of emotion in her voice as she stared ahead hauntingly. She wouldn't answer my frantic questions despite my cries and pleas. My nervous fingers clawed at the raw skin of my palms, the hot blood leaking out. The warmth was just as numb to me as the searing pain it brought. Whatever her uncle had done to her this time was more than she could take. To be broken again after everything she had been through. My skin crawled at the very notion of what could possibly have done that. My hand tightened around the very real object in my pocket. The handle warm and sticky from my own wounds. I had been kidding myself all along. I wasn't going to do it. I hadn't slept all week, mulling over the idea in my mind, the notion like a sickness that made my stomach churn. My tired mind fought the black sludge with what little strength I had left. The very concept was so incredibly absurd that I shouldn't have been bothered by the intrusive thoughts, but what scared me more than anything was how seriously I fought them back. If I truly trusted myself to not act on them, why was I so horrified? Why did my vision pulse with icy adrenaline and my limbs seize up? Why did I not sleep? Why did the shadows of the world stretch like haunting figures staring down on me for something I had yet to do? I was the hero, damn it. Why couldn't they see that? I was saving her. I could save everyone I cared about, no matter the cost. From the beginning of the diseased, delusive origin of the thought, I had set the plan into motion, trusting myself not to follow through with it. I knew that I was kidding myself. I knew this as I stole the knife over a month ago. I knew this as Julie's increasingly worrisome words made my hands clench. I knew this as her horrified eyes told me that I couldn't save her. And above all, I knew this as my shoes crunched in the snow as it began to accumulate. The house looming up ahead. Seeing this structure would surely cause my charade to fail. I would realize that I didn't have it in me. Reason would take over and snap me out of this nightmare. But it didn't. The front door should have made me realize that this was more real than I had ever known in my delusive hallucinations. The feel of the wood as my hands struck it several times should have brought something forward, something sanity would have provided. But nothing came. My mind remained dull and fixed ahead in a stare as a booming voice called from within the house and heavy footsteps reached the door. Nothing rose from my mind, not an ounce of realization. No, it wasn't until the door opened and it was far too late that the true gravity of the situation splintered into view like a Goliath beast to whom I could never compare. My muscles froze solid and my heart stopped cold. The man's face crested with recognition as his narrowing eyes gazed at me. His voice alone was enough to break my ribs as he shouted,
"What the hell are you doing here?"
His massive, leathery hand gripped my shoulder and squeezed tighter than I thought possible.
"I thought I made myself pretty damn clear,"
he shouted, the force of his hand threatening to separate the bones in my shoulder, the tendon shifting out of place.
"I found out that you were still hanging around her before she went to school yesterday. I thought I taught her a lesson. I warned her. If she ever talked to you again, I'd slit your damn throat. You got no business here, boy. Leave my family alone. You don't have any evidence at all. If you squeal again, I'll rip your fucking lungs out. You got that?"
My mouth was dry, absolute panic making my legs weak and my heart beat like a jackhammer. I tried to stammer out something, anything, but all that came out were strangled squeaks. His teeth gnashed and his burly hand let go forcefully, causing me to stumble back, falling down the porch steps and landing in the snow.
"Did you not fucking hear me, boy?"
He screamed.
"I'll fucking kill you! Get the hell out of here! And stop playing the hero, you piece of shit!"
The door slammed shut, and my veins pulsed with dread, pure fear negating my ability to move. I lay like that for nearly a minute before finally being able to rise to my feet, my weak limbs shaking and hollow. I truly had been kidding myself. This was far too horrifying for me to handle alone. When had I become this delusive? My feet felt heavy and stiff as I walked slowly away from the porch into the void of winter. Suddenly, however, my blood ran cold with ice, my hands sprawling out in horror. I couldn't walk away. In my delusion, I had already made the call. I had gone too far to turn back now. My teeth gnashed, misted breath coming in ragged intervals. Surely they would be here any minute now. I had no time to lose. I screamed this warning to myself over and over as I staggered slowly back towards the house, my twitching hand pulling out the blade slowly. The metal glinted softly in the decayed sunlight as I unzipped my jacket slowly, my hands shaking to the point where I could barely grasp the zipper as I angled the blade towards myself. If I could just avoid puncturing a lung. No, I would aim lower than that. So long as the paramedics were on their way as promised, this plan could still work. The blade pressed against my stomach, my vision blurring with panicked tears as I tried to calm my breathing. Suddenly, I stumbled violently, the blade lightly breaking the skin as my foot caught on something sharp. My gaze flashed down to the ground to see it. Jagged and broken, almost concealed by the falling snow. What was left of a doghouse. The structure was utterly flattened, the splintered wood lying in shambles. My eyes went wide. The way Julie had been so thoroughly haunted and unresponsive, and the fact that, despite how she always commented on how annoying her dog was, not a single bark had emanated from the house when I knocked on the door. My blood froze, my stance going rigid as the realization drained the color from my face. Before I even had a chance to process anything, however, the door again swung open and the man stepped out behind me, his voice cutting through the cold air.
"How many times do I have to tell you before you fucking listen?"
He screamed.
"I'm about ready to break your fucking neck, you hear me?"
I couldn't move, couldn't see through my blind terror, and as his shadowy form came storming off the porch towards me, all I could do was tighten my grip in panic. present day. The room was darker than I could have imagined, so much so that I thought I was confined within a small lightless box until my panicked limbs thrashed outwards to reveal that my space was far more expansive than I thought. It took me several minutes to realize that the silence surrounding me wasn't very silent at all. It was filled with beeps and the hum of distant lights. My eyes slowly came to focus and I began to make out the contents of the room around me. A light green curtain draped down like a corpse to my left, the area otherwise empty and expansive, white walls sparsely filled with small pictures, charts perhaps, rapidly vibrating in my distorted vision. Glancing to my right caused me to draw a breath. Slumped onto the covers of my bed was a mess of human hair draping over my arm. I instinctively tried to jerk back, only to find that the hair had intense weight to it. And upon further focusing my eyes, it became clear that it was attached to a body, one which had wilted over like a dead flower, its arms splayed out on the bed, crossing over my legs. In shock, I pulled my arm out from under its head and scrambled to sit upright. This caused the ghastly form to suddenly stir. Its head rose to greet me, strand-like hair falling to the sides as if it was wet. Its skin was so pale and stretched that it appeared as though it would decay to nothing at any second, as its spindly limbs bent and broke to prop itself up. A familiar pair of yellowed eyes suddenly flashed in the dim light. Upon seeing my face, her sluggish eyelids suddenly snapped open and she jerked back with such speed that I flinched as well.
John!
She cried, her hands flying from the bed as her eyes danced around wildly, appearing to radiate light. I tried to speak only to find my throat far too dry, little less than air escaping my cracked lips.
You're awake!
She rasped, looking like she hadn't slept in weeks.
John, are you okay? How are you feeling?
My hands found their way to my throat where I discovered a bandage wrapped around my neck like a collar. Unable to speak but desperately trying, I couldn't do anything but point to my throat and gag out airy sounds. Julie's face contorted with fearful recognition, and her hands fumbled rapidly for a glass of water by the side of my bed. She seemed more shaken than she had ever been, and in her panic she simply slapped the glass off the table with such force that it shattered against the wall. She cursed under her breath and fumbled to steady the table, slicing her hand across a wooden edge in the process. I sat up in further concern and my hand splayed out in the air. Julie tried to collect herself but couldn't stop shaking. She hurriedly wiped the hair out of her eyes, smearing her own blood across her forehead. It was only then that I realized this was not the only blood on her. Her hair had appeared strange before because it was, in fact, stuck together in wet, ropey strands, globs of a dark substance soiling the once golden sheen. My concern intensified into horror at this, and I threw the covers from myself, reaching out to Julie. She instantly snapped around to grasp my hand in hers, so hard that I let out a light gasp. Violently quaking as if possessed now, her eyes vibrated between me and the rest of the room, and it looked as though she was about to have a breakdown, or was in the middle of one. I went to try and speak again, only to stop in my tracks as I noticed the door to the hospital room. It was barricaded, with a table and some chairs. Julie let out a strained giggle, as if she was strangling it from her throat, and a smile suddenly split across her face. I swung my legs off the bed and let them dangle, trying to hop down to the floor but unable to with Julie gripping me, as her smile ate across her face.
I'm so glad you're awake!
She whispered with a shaking voice. Another cackle was yanked from within her hollow lungs, and her wild eyes flashed gold as her fingernails began to draw blood from my hands. She seemed unable to sit still, squirming around like her insides were on fire. I made rasping sounds again, meaning to ask her what the hell had happened, but unable to do so. I simply tried again to hop down from the bed, but Julie stopped me with an unblinking stare through wide eyes. Her head cocked to the left as her face violently flashed between a smile and extreme concern.
Don't put your feet there.
She whispered out, writhing in her chair, scratching down my hands.
I made a mess.
My eyes naturally glanced down off the bed, and my heart pulsed with ice, sending frozen shards through my veins. From underneath the hospital bed, organs and entrails had spilled forth like serpents, lying scattered in glistening heaps. I could make out a ghastly face staring directly up at me with unblinking eyes, lips cold and blue. Black blood painted the entirety of the once reflective white floor. Unreal amounts splashed out in every direction.
I dissected her, John.
Her nails dragged on my hand, peeling off a layer of skin. Her head twitched violently to the left, as if her neck was broken, and her following deranged smile was fueled by confusion and pain.
They were going to kill you!
She suddenly cried, as if remembering, jumping to her feet and pulling me off the bed. My socks landed squarely in a massive pool of blood, and they instantly grew wet. And cold. This body had been here for some time. The door rattled violently and muffled voices rang out from outside the room.
Your neck wound wasn't that deep.
Julie cried.
They say by the time they got to you, it was nearly entirely healed. You don't even really need that bandage anymore. They should have just discharged you.
I went to take a step, but she suddenly threw me back to the bed, holding my weak arms down.
The nurse was prepping you for anesthetic.
She twitched out, looking down at the corpse she was currently standing on.
Everything I thought was wrong. I'm taking your side.
Julie, I was finally able to cough out. What are you talking about? My gaze drifted to the table beside my bed, and something atop the counter caught my eye. I squinted, and my concern grew into confusion before rupturing into absolute terror and disbelief. There was a notebook, a horrid drawing scratched onto the page. It was of me. My face lay in shambles, my entrails spilling out from the hospital bed, blood drawn splattering across every corner of the page, the pencil having been dragged through the paper so vigorously that it went through several layers. Julie's grip on me only tightened, and her body squirmed even more as the knocks outside grew more intense, faint, unintelligible orders being shouted into the room. "Julie!" I cried, disbelief still racking my brain as I nodded to the notebook. "Did you draw this?" She writhed, her grip finally slipping as her hands clawed in front of her, and her smile cracked into a fissure that split across her face.
I've drawn quite a lot recently.
She convulsed.
I did that one just before you woke. But I would never do that to you. Like I told you, I've taken your side. I've only ever made a few of my drawings a reality.
Hisses were drawn from her throat, and she made an explosion sound, gesturing in every direction, giggling. "You've killed people before this," I coughed, my eyes wider than they ever had been.
A month or two ago.
She squirmed, grabbing her notebook and instantly tearing through the pages as if to find the drawing for me. I noticed that, as she leafed through the pages, nearly all of them were full of horrific images. My hands rushed to stop her from going through her horrible notebook, and as I gripped her arms firmly, she finally stopped moving. I jumped off the bed, barely even noticing the squishing corpse under my feet as I held Julie, so entirely unsure of what to do that I didn't do much of anything at all. I didn't want to believe it, but could I really ignore the signs? How long had she been this deranged? I dropped her hands and began backing up towards the door where the voices shouted in. She had calmed down considerably, and I watched her eyes flash to her suitcase, situated in the corner of the room. Julie, I stammered, meandering between the door and her, so utterly helpless and overwhelmed. I think there's something inside of you.
Don't go out there.
She suddenly cried as I got near the door barricade.
They're going to kill you.
No, they're not, Julie. I stammered. You are going to kill me. You are going to kill all of us. Don't you understand what's happening to you? How long have you been doing these things? Maybe there's still time. I tore my hands across my scalp, gritting my teeth. Why was she only awakening now? She was 4 years too late.
You're not listening, John.
Julie cried, her posture slackening and her body ceasing to writhe.
I was waiting for you to wake up. We have to go.
I swayed lightly on my feet, glancing wildly around me. Several heavy hits resounded against the door, and I heard the telltale sound of jangling metal. Whatever people were outside, they had guns. I couldn't let anyone near Julie. She was a ticking time bomb. I couldn't let anyone show any sort of aggression towards her. Surely that would cause her to snap for good. If I couldn't get to the repressive drugs of the facility, no one would survive this. You're right, I cried, walking past Julie into the window of the room, lifting it up and feeling the blast of cold night air, only to find a screen underneath. Where's Callie? I cried, turning back to Julie, suddenly remembering. Surely the facility had picked up on the location of the accident outside my car.
Probably still lying in the road.
Julie spat.
When the man came in his car, he thought she was dead, just like the other two people. I told him to leave her and tend to you. She tried to kill you, John.
She wasn't trying to kill me, I cried, rage suddenly flashing through my veins. She was trying to kill you. She was trying to protect me from you. My voice abruptly stopped, question splintering through my brain. How had Callie known this was happening to Julie? What the hell was going on between the two of them?
When that man took us to the hospital,
Julie continued.
The doctors saw that you fell down the stairs.
She slowly walked to the center of the room, her steps deranged and staggered. Her lavender hoodie glistened red in the moonlight, her flowing blonde hair falling to cover her haunting eyes, and she turned to stare at me.
Your skin was pretty bruised and beaten up, John.
She continued.
It concerned them much more than the light throat wound.
I absent-mindedly nodded at her, knocking the screen from its hinges with my elbow. We'll need to find a car, I stammered, working to jam the window open further, my heart again solidifying as I said my next words. We're going after Callie, I breathed, trying to keep my voice strong. We need to get both of you to the facility. I'm not giving up on anything yet. I'm not letting anyone else die.
Quit changing the subject,
Julie said slowly, a smile starting to spread across her face again. Her notebook crinkled between her clawing hands. I slowly let my hands drop to my sides as I heard a bout of giggles begin to build from within Julie's throat.
The doctors took an x-ray of you, John.
Julie smiled crookedly, stumbling over to me where her hands wrapped around my waist, her blood-soaked hair parting and again revealing her dancing gold eyes.
They said they were going to operate on you, but that it was an extremely risky procedure and you'd likely die, paralysis almost guaranteed. I wouldn't let them take that risk, though. You don't have to hide anymore.
My eyes began to widen, my arteries expanding as ice found its way into my heart.
John,
Julie smiled.
The doctors told me all about what they found at the base of your spine.
Collapse into unconsciousness, fade to black. I cannot be fixed, screaming out to death. Will she let me live? Face the darkness, I am not ready. It is too late, I can't be saved. Voices call my name, angels whisper to me, death by my side. Deliverance, the end is near. My fate is sealed. My spirit is ready to part with my body. Fade away, breathe no more as I pass on into eternity.